It's Melanie White here on the Sage Women podcast, and I'm here today with one of our consultants, Danielle Dobson, and we're going to give a bit of a wrap-up of the Wellbeing at Work Summit that we attended this week on Tuesday, which was the 14th of November. Hi, Danielle. How are you today?
Melanie, great. Thanks for having me on.
It's lovely to see you again. It was really nice to catch up in person and go to the summit.
It was great. It was such a great venue, healthy food, amazing people, great conversations, and I got to spend time with you. So that's the best bit.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's nice to catch up in person. And I guess that's some of the things that we'll talk about today include those sorts of things, that engagement, that conversation, that culture building, that approach that really engages people and gets people interested in making healthy change.
Great.
I want to ask you, I guess we can talk about maybe tag team our key takeaways, but what was an insight that you got from the summit if you want to kick off?
I think the biggest insight that I got was from speaking to HR leaders and team members and directors, DE&I specialists and leaders, L&D professionals, the people who seem to be tasked with the implementation of, wellbeing programs and the challenges that they were facing right now. So things around, people burning out, around, cost constraints, I guess tailing off to the end of the year now and not really wanting to commit to things right now because there's so much else on, all these other like initiatives that they're working on. They all understand that how important it is, but it's having the bandwidth to look into these things, implement them, and do something meaningful. I think that was probably the biggest insight I got, really, when I spoke to people.
If I could nutshell that, it sounds like you're talking about people being under-resourced to tackle big, complex problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Under-resourced, big one. Perfect. Nailed it. Yep.
It was interesting. I heard a similar theme on one of the roundtables I sat in on, which was really interesting. It was hosted by Virgin Pulse, and it was about mental health and wellbeing at work. And some people there sharing their stories from their organisations came up with a lot of common themes. And really interesting, one person said, in reference to this under-resourced comment that you made, she just said, we have to have external people helping us because we're asked to do so many things and it's really hard for them to get outcomes and to implement things when they're trying to tackle so many things. And she just said, you really need to have people supporting your organisation to get things done in a cost-effective way.
Absolutely. And you know what? This is what I'm finding in my work too, in terms of my coaching, facilitation, consultancy, that there is just so many jobs and tasks that people are tasked with doing. And often it does fall back to HR. And the interesting thing is, like, I look at this and I say, why is wellbeing, declining? Why are we having so many challenges with mental health? So it can't all be what programs do we need in place, but let's understand what's at the root cause of this. Like, why did we get to where we are now? And there's a lot of complex, it's quite complex. There's a lot of, challenges around it. It's societal, it's community, it's family, it's, workplace culture and all those sort of things. So I'm not for one second saying that there's a silver bullet. But what I'm finding more and more, what research is showing us more and more, is that the people who actually do take well-being seriously, their own and their teams, because they are working on well-being, so they're paying more attention to themselves and others, they're doing the work, they're asking the questions, they're caring about, themselves or not, maybe not themselves, but their team. They're actually the people most often who are most likely to have a higher toll or impact on their own well-being because they're looking after other people. That's the really cool paradox of this in terms of leadership as well. So it's an interesting one. It's like, how do we actually change, structures and processes and systems to ensure that everyone's set up to succeed. So there's an element of that in addition to programs. And I'm
Mm.
sure we have lots of great ideas about how we can help with that.
Yeah, and just touching on that leadership aspect, I mean, having been involved in the mental health space, and that was a very big theme in this summit. The research that's come out of Curtin University into the fly-in, fly-out workforces, when you're looking at psychosocial hazards, of course, there are so many hazards in remote work, but those studies found that the most important thing in somebody's mental well health is their relationship with their line manager, and the type of person that line manager is, and how emotionally intelligent they are, and how compassionate they are, and how much they listen, versus being driven to achieve KPIs. And then last week we spoke to Kat Riak on the webinar where she described the research done by NHS Scotland into the impact of menopause on businesses. Same thing, line managers and their approach and their approachability, their skills, their confidence, their emotional intelligence, that made the difference in women feeling comfortable and supported at work versus not. And when you think about people resigning or not, obviously leaders are so important, and they don't have to have heaps and heaps of skills and training around specific areas of health, but they do need to know how to have empathetic conversations. But I mean, you're the leadership specialist in our team. Tell us a bit more about some of those things from your
And
experience.
yeah, I love that you've have that research specifically about FIFO and then menopausal women, and to add more to that, what we know year after year when Gallup do their studies and research, that 70% of the someone's experience at work is determined by their line manager. So that reiterates everything you're just saying then across a whole range of industries and professions. So that's quite a big responsibility. And absolutely. So the key absolutely is having that great relationship with your employees, and absolutely emotional intelligence. And that could be something as simple as showing that the leader cares, asking them about their day, about their family. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to do any empathy training or jump through any hoops, but just actually have a keen interest in someone else. And we were talking about it earlier about a study that McKinsey has done on employee wellbeing, so leaders' perception of their team's wellbeing. And what that showed consistently across all metrics is that leaders were ranking that their employees' well-being at a higher level than what employees were ranking themselves. And the gap showed up to be around 22%. So that's quite a gap to overcome. So what can actually help with that? Everything that you just mentioned, the emotional intelligence, the showing that they care, and having those conversations and asking their people what they want and need, because it's going to be different for each person. And that's something that really came out from the Wellbeing
Yes.
Summit too, didn't it?
Yes, everything's highly individualized in terms of needs and wants, and even somebody that has the same disease, like diabetes, let's say, how that needs to be approached or what their needs are might be very different. And so that goes back to the point made earlier that leaders don't have to have specialist health knowledge, but they do need to know how to have conversations with a range of different people and to be empathetic. And that's hard when you are a leader and you're responsible for so many people, and that level of responsibility in your work and the amount of time and pressure that you have in your own role, and then having to juggle the needs of your team as well, and have a way to check in with them. It's tough for a leader.
Absolutely. And there's an interesting thing that is also happening too. People in leadership training circles and coaches, and studies are showing us as well that in terms of what people being asked to do more with less resources at work, so being asked to do more, that's definitely something that is a challenge. But what we're finding now is there's something even more at play here. It's not just the workload, it's the collaboration required in teams, within teams and cross teams, and within workplaces now. That takes time and energy. Things like scheduling, things like meetings. So it's ramping up meeting, numbers, numbers of meetings and times that people are in meetings, emails, preparing for meetings, rescheduling meetings, because of this collaboration challenge. That collaboration is good. We all know that, but it's adding to the workload and the stress and the emotional and cognitive load for
Mm.
leaders and teams. So there's something that also needs to be addressed on top of doing more with less resources and this huge focus on growth. So it's something that is probably not spoken about a lot, because we all kind of, the common thinking is to collaborate, innovate, be creative.
Mm.
It does come at a cost, though. So it's something to keep in mind too.
Actually, that's a very good point. And we did have a conversation with someone about, and that was a theme at the summit, of how do we deal with remote work? How do we get people back in the office? And at the roundtable I was sitting at, somebody said, we can't force people to come into the office. We have to attract them. How do we do that? How do we engage them? And I know that you've done a bit of that work too.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is going to be different for everyone, each organization, and each team. What we noticed over COVID and lockdowns when no one was coming to work at all, is that there was a bit of a disconnection in terms of company-wide. So employees and team members not really being engaged with company-wide initiatives, or generally everyone else in their department. What was noticed is when there is decent leadership, or even decent team members, the strength within the team grew. So I guess one way of tackling this is to build and leverage on that, if there is that that strength within the team, to leverage that team sort of spirit, that team engagement, and wanting to not let your team members down, to broaden that out to the organisation. And there's been some really great initiatives that I've seen over the past few years. I mean, it is getting to a pointy end now with the hybrid working, but things like opportunities for connection. So sessions where, they might have started off with donut day, barbecue Friday, things like that, and then the food that sort of wore thin, and then opportunities for in-house speakers and in-house events and panel discussions and things that where people can opt into. So some hybrid events and things like that, so people could opt in from home, but then people could come in as well, and then listen to people within their organization, not necessarily external people, but understand their stories, building connection. And then also something that I do now with organizations is conducting listening sessions, which have been brilliant in organizations, like looking, what policies are landing, what's working well, like what's strong, what's wrong, so some blind spots, and what's next, so some fresh and innovative ideas. So sitting down and listening. So it's not only great to extract the ideas and the information from people, but it's an opportunity for people in cross-functional teams to get together. Some are haven't met each other before, because of the lockdowns, to share parts of who they are, to be honest and open, and just have that time together, taking time out to connect. And the interesting thing with that is, it might seem, it's 90 minutes to take out, but what each person typically receives from that, it might be a connection, a quicker, process has resolved, better communication, conflict resolution, all these great things. So getting people in that room, and that can be hybrid as well. So sometimes we have people online and in the room, but creating those opportunities for connection, asking people, what they think, what they need, putting it into the mix, feeding it back to execs or the leadership team, and then the key thing there is to ensure that they act on it in some way.
Really powerful. And as you're talking, I'm thinking of a podcast I was listening to this morning where they talked about the fact that people get bored and stale in their same roles. And there was one company talking about the fact that every 90 days they'd move their employees into a slightly different role to give them fresh ideas and challenges to then take back to the original role, which might seem a bit challenging or difficult, but I think what you're talking about, the opportunity to come together in a different context and collaborate, does bring in that freshness and that creative brain space that gets people thinking differently about work, building those connections in a different way, and possibly reinvigorating a workplace.
Absolutely. And when you can partner with someone external who people are able to trust and who can create a safe space and do all the scheduling and all the planning, everything's completely
Yeah.
taken off the plate of leaders and HRD and I. It just provides a different lens and a different opportunity and a different temperature in the room, I guess, because everything when they know that it's confidential and themes will be fed back, not exact comments, and it's Chatham House rules and that sort of thing. It provides even more opportunities for everything that you've just mentioned.
Mm. And I guess what we're talking about is changing a culture.
Mm.
And if a workplace wants to adopt anything to do with mental health, with menopause, with healthy aging, with anything, you have to have people on board with that, and you have to have a culture of health focus, health literacy. All of that stuff's really critical.
Absolutely. And this is what I'm hearing now too. There's, the difference between, I think, success and failure, if you want to say it like that. You've got organizations who have these really great policies. The optics and the marketing, the PR says that we care about our people. And they have, might have, bring in speakers to talk about burnout, but then they don't have a strategy in place to deal with that. They might offer yoga classes and Pilates on site, but then they expect their people to work really long hours. So then what happens is it becomes, or mental health day or something like that. There's people coming in, socials and all the rest of it, but absolutely nothing dealing with the structural and systemic challenges that they're facing. So what happens is that looks like a tokenist. Every one of those things looks very tokenistic because it's not followed up with the strategies, with the implementation, with the commitment to actually do something about it structurally and in terms of processes. However, there's a organisation I was speaking to recently. It's a not-for-profit. They can't compete on pay, and they were losing people. So, as an aged care provider, they were losing people hand over fist, and they have a very enlightened HR director, and she wanted to understand why people leave, why people stay, and at the heart of it was connection, contribution, being part of a team, and people who care. So she has provided similar things to everything I just mentioned there. But because she can back it up with great leadership, a great culture, they have not lost anyone in a year. And they do simple things like, cake for people's birthdays, not so great for wellness and well-being, but cakes, they have special days like Gratitude Day, I don't know, Takeaway Thursday, another, not so great thing. But all of these things have contributed to people feeling like they belong and that they're cared for. But the key thing is, because I was saying to this person, that can happen and it can be seen as tokenistic. And delve deeper, this HR director has put a lot of effort into building her team, a good quality team of leaders who take care of their people. So it's a process, but she has done that with the culture.
Amazing. And it would be interesting to see how well that business is performing now. Because particularly in aged care, and I was speaking to someone about this at the last summit we both went to, actually, I said, what happens if one of your menopausal leaders running one of your aged care facilities decides to retire early? And she said, oh my God, that would have a massive impact, because people in aged care, the clients, like consistency and familiarity. If that leader leaves, and then if there is a flow-on resignation of other staff, or even if there's not, it's a huge disruption and change for the residents of that facility. And it's going to cause chaos if that person leaves. And so keeping people, helping them to feel valued, helping to support well-being so people don't burn out is obviously really critical, not just for the employees, but also the clients of the business.
Absolutely. Which depending on your kind of mission statement, I guess, as an organization, that is absolutely critical. Like
Mm.
in terms of, clients, end users, customers, people are everything, and how people feel cared for as they engage with your business. So, I mean, I don't know about you, but I know any kind of relationship that I establish, with a business or an organization, it's usually that first person, that first point of call,
Mm.
that I've engaged with, that is a person that I want to keep speaking to, because I don't want to have to build relationships with everyone,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you hear often, people moving with other people. So if they're resigning to go to a better workplace where they feel more cared for, absolutely impact is losing customers, clients, residents,
Mm.
everyone.
Yeah. And I mean, they're going to have a Senate inquiry into menopause and the cost and those flow-on effects, but it makes sense that it's in all areas. And I think going back to the summit, something that I loved about this summit, and I'd love to hear your views on this, is that everybody there wanted to improve health and well-being. They wanted to take a really whole of person, holistic approach and to bring well-being into organizations in a way that was, I mean, I know they talked about being cost effective, but really to have an impact, not just to put something in place to satisfy certain criteria. I think everyone at that summit was really wholeheartedly engaged with having an impact in well-being and performance in their organizations. And it was so great to be around like-minded people. But I'd love to hear your view on that, or anything else that you thought was the best part of that summit.
Absolutely. I had exactly the same sense, which was absolutely brilliant. And I'm going to name it. It was majority women in the room. Very few men, majority women, and those kind of roles, I guess, attract women. I guess HRD and L&D, and absolutely, this is the really fantastic thing. And what I've seen um, transition over these few years is CFOs are now on board now too, because they can see the financial impact, to the bottom line. CEOs, they're seeing it now. That it's not in days gone by, it was seen as the right thing to do. Now it's seen as a good business investment, and a way of sustainably keeping your people, and keeping maintaining growth, and all of those kind of um, things that keep CEOs up at night, returning to shareholder groups, and managing business risk and brand, and having high performing teams. The evidence is in. But yeah, absolutely, every people in that room all wanted to make an impact. They want to do their best, and they're bringing a business lens with them now. So this is the really exciting thing about where we are right now, because we can bring it all together. DE&I, well-being, mental health, leadership. You can tie it all into productivity, which is exciting, being a former accountant.
You're so right. It is about having that impact. And we certainly saw some numbers at the summit too. Some of the organizations there have been measuring changes in different metrics of productivity and performance, and showing that teams that are healthier and have greater well-being are performing much better, having fewer sick days, better profitability, all sorts of things. And so I think that's really exciting too, because in the past, I think companies have thought, oh, I'll just get this program in, or I'll just do that. But it's been a bit hit and miss. I love the fact that people at this summit were talking about, well, what's our strategy? How are we going to take a strategic view of what the workplace needs, and really invest in what people need and want, not what we think that they want, not just to tick a box, but to actually have an impact and to measure that impact. I think that's really great to see that happening.
Absolutely. And I was really interested in one of the panel discussions where a HRD leader said that they're moving away from the pillar approach, well-being, DE&I, mental health, all these different sort of pillars, to looking at how they all integrate together. And as you mentioned, so having more of a strategy around that, not plans on a page, as such for each of those individual things, but how they all intersect and help each other, which then, you know, contributes towards that productivity, as I mentioned. But yeah, absolutely, it's really exciting.
Thanks for taking time today, Danielle, to talk about the summit with me. Any last thoughts before we wrap up?
No, it's just really great to be part of this and be part of the Sage team. And I'm so excited about what we're creating.
I agree. Thanks for today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.